Welcome back after Thanksgiving, and thank you for being here. Someone brought to my attention that the capacity is 258 in this room, and if we get to that, we'll be delighted. I would say that it is about a half a minute past 11, and we're not 3/4 of the way there, so we shall see. Why are we waving back there, Mr. Larry? You just want us to know you're here?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, very good, very good. Our purpose today is, it is a multiple purpose presentation. First of all, we're doing some videoing because we know folks have class today. Other people have assignments that don't allow them to be here. So we will videotape and then have that available. We want to give you some updates. We had hoped to have a full review of our HLC draft document. We don't have that yet. I would say today or tomorrow. We were hoping that it would come over the weekend, and then we realized that Thanksgiving weekend probably was not when the writing group wanted to finish their writing, so I would say today or tomorrow we will have it. I do want to take the opportunity to thank all of you who were involved in the writing process. I want to thank all of you that went to the various sessions, answered questions, did individual interviews. HLC only comes every 10 years, as many of you know. Come on in, folks. As many of you know, they come once every 10 years, and it is a monumental feat when they come, and I appreciate all that you did, as does our whole senior team appreciate all that you did. I know that most of the stress rests with the provost's office, so Rhonda is very thankful and certainly appreciative. My comments as the final session with HLC were very positive. Some of you know the chair of the team meets with the president as they prepare to depart. It was a very positive meeting. A few of the suggestions that they had made, I think we're all aware of. We look forward to seeing how they might write those for us and give us some instruction. But overall, I think it was a very good visit, and I think we'll have a detailed report that we can work from very soon. I also want to thank those of you who have been involved in other specialized accreditation visits. We have run the gauntlet here in the last 5 or 6 weeks. We have the PA accreditation team here today. We had the College of Education with a team about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. We had ABET here for engineering the week before that. So we have had many specialized accreditors here, and this is not by design. This is we did not plan it this way. It's just the way the systematic timing comes with those opportunities. But again, thank you all for your work. I know it is certainly detailed and sometimes painful, but the end results have been very positive. Did I leave out anything for HLC, Rhonda, other than waiting for the report?
I think so.
Okay. Commencement. A reminder to all of you that commencement is on the 16th. That seems incredibly close in that the first is this week. So the close of the semester is upon us, and as all of us know, commencement is one of the great days at a university. It is truly probably the most enjoyable day in the life of a president to see students go across the stage. Some of them have been with us 7, 8, 9 years doing an undergraduate degree, and some of them have been with us 4, 5, or 6 years doing a graduate degree. So if it is possible in your schedule, it's certainly always nice to have a nice turnout for the 16th for commencement. It truly is one of our great and exciting times of the year. And in that we do one in December, it's very large and I think very impressive to see how it all comes together. Giving Tuesday is today, and I would be remiss not to give a plug. If you haven't turned on WEMU this morning, you will hear a consistent plug for Giving Tuesday. There are many opportunities to give. Last year was, I believe, a record year. I'm looking for Bill here. Was it a record year last year for Giving Tuesday?
This will be as well.
This will be as well. No hesitation there. So I know all of you have areas within your concentrations or within your program areas that you're aware of. Giving Tuesday is an opportunity to give to those areas and help the students that you work with, or give opportunities for students that we don't yet know to come here and be with us. So I certainly appreciate your opportunities to give. If you want to hear jazz this afternoon, King Hall, I think it's actually going on right now. Is that right, Walter and Jeff? The music is going on in King Hall right now, and this afternoon in McKinney we will also have an event. You can, as I said, designate to many, many different opportunities, and certainly if you have any questions, Bill Shepard's here, several members of our development team are here. Feel free to ask them or to give them an idea that you might have, and I'm sure that they will have a solution, a resolution, or some kind of response for you with respect to Giving Tuesday. There are two items that I want to cover, and I'll do them as quickly as I can, as we have a relatively long piece on Strong Hall construction, and then we do want to give a lot of time to the budget forum as well. Several of you are aware, I know preliminary discussions have gone on in Health and Human Services. We've had discussions in the last day or two, I believe, Scott, on square footage from CAPS and from clinical psych. We are in discussions with St. Joe, our partner in many healthcare initiatives, to look at the opportunity to expand our relationship with them in an on-campus clinic that would serve our students, that would serve all of us should we wish to go to the clinic there, and would serve the community of Ypsilanti as well. Preliminary is the right word. I spoke to Dave Brooks early this morning. David is the CEO at St. Joe's, and I think he would echo the comment that both groups are excited, but we are not with final plans, we're not with final designs, we're not with final execution. Sometime after the first of the year, I think we will have all of that, and hopefully by the February board meeting we will be able to go forward with what we would like to see as a combined effort. A facility that has, for example, clinical psych and has CAPS in it, and has primary care physicians there, has what we call mid-levels, PAs and nurse practitioners as well, all in a design that really is a full-service clinic, a full-service medical facility. If you've been to the one that IHA runs at Domino Farms, you'll know what that looks like, and that's the discussion that's going forward now. Again, nothing's been finalized. We don't have final design plans. We don't have final execution plans, but we do have groups that are discussing with us what they would like to see if we were able to do that. And I know we have our Vice President of Student Government in the very back. Almost from the very first day I was here, I heard from students that their dream would be a different medical design than we offer currently on campus. And we're trying to live up to that dream. We're trying to meet their expectations. And we're hoping for the February board meeting to have that information. Again, as details are available, we'll certainly roll those out. I know that parking has been a question for a number of you. We have tried to put as much information out as we can on parking. You can go back and certainly see all the way from the I think it was May 28th, is that right, Walter? 29th, we had our first story outlining parking, and then all the way up into the last few weeks. The RFP is finished, it is out. We expect to have numbers back this week. So between now and the end of the week, we hope to have all those numbers from the potential concessionaires, is the word that we use for a parking vendor. And then we'll make a determination if the number is robust and it meets what we think our capital needs are. Capital in that they will be managing a big space of parking on campus. We will go forward. As I've said before, and the board has articulated probably far better than I, that if it does not, then we will not. There's no reason to enter into a deal that we don't think benefits all of us financially and meets the needs of our students and our staff and all those who park on campus. I did see the RFP. Those of you who have seen it, double-sided, it's about this thick, so it's not the most delightful of evening reading, but it is very detailed, saying days that we have, what do they call them, global parking days, Mike, where you can, the whole campus would be, there's no charge for parking for move-in, for example, and there's no charge for parking for Martin Luther King Day at this facility, and there's no parking for the symposium in certain lots. We've tried to detail as much of that out as we possibly can, and we'll continue to work with the final determination of the concessionaire through those various issues. So we are trying to make a detailed plan as we possibly can, and by the board meeting on the 15th, we hope to have that finalized. Again, if we don't have all the numbers in the order that we hope or in the magnitude that we hope, we simply won't go forward with the plan. So we'll certainly try to answer as much as we can after seeing the numbers, but I wanted to make you all aware of that because I know it is a discussion point. At the end of this session, we're going to take questions on virtually any topic you'd like to throw out. But first, I'd like to move to Strong Hall, which is a very large project going on now. Those of you who lived and worked in Strong Hall have gone to your swing spaces, and I've heard from a number of people the swing space design has worked well. So certainly congratulations to John Donegan and his team. And I believe Scott is going to be the kickoff. Scott Store is going to be the kickoff for Strong Hall. And I have one task to do, which is to show you the agenda here. So after Scott will go Mike, and then Scott will take questions regarding Strong Hall with the team that he's assembled. Mike will take budget questions, and then we'll do open Q&A. And then my second thing is to queue up Strong Hall and to hand you the clicker. So thank you, everyone.
Well, good morning. And we're here to give you a quick update on the Strong Hall renovation project. It's been a long time coming, and anyone who's been around the site, you can tell that it's well on its way. I would like to introduce two members of the project team. Bob Dentzik, university architect, and Chris Longerbeam, he's the project manager for the university. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the presentation, I just want to give a little bit of background on the project. Finishing up and following Pray Herald, this has been our #1 state capital outlay project since 2009. It is a complete building renovation. The total project budget, $39.5 million. The state's appropriation, $29 million. The university's approximately $10 million. One of the key notes here, the building was built in 1957, and there has been no significant renovations since it was built. And those that are teaching in that building, they can attest to that. Also, as our partners on the job, we have, of course, the state of Michigan, along with us as the owner. We have Stantec, who is the project architect of record. The construction manager is Clark Construction. And for program management services, we have AECOM on board. It's a great project team, one of the best, I think, that we've assembled. Just a quick timeline, events that's gone on with the project and where we're going to go with it. July 2016, we got planning authorization from the state. Before that, it was 2009 when we submitted. Long time. Fast forward to August of 2017, this summer, we had received design approval from the state. And with that, we got the go-ahead to start some early construction activities. We did the abatement. We're finishing up the demo right now. And we are well underway with construction, and we plan, and the goal is to be substantially complete for December of 2018, and we are tracking on schedule for that right now, and Chris is going to talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. Okay, so we had to get everybody out of the building before we could start construction. Phase program function relocation. Very, very fancy phrase for swing space. I think that's what everybody knows on campus of what that is. We finished that up this summer, and really two big highlights of that project associated with the Strong Hall is the Roosevelt Hall Auditorium. We basically did a complete renovation there and took that one large auditorium, turned it into two fully functional classroom spaces. When we started the demo on that project, we unveiled a barrel-vaulted ceiling that we've been able to restore. So if you haven't been to that site, I would encourage you to get there. It's absolutely beautiful. We have to put the final seats in this December, and we're scheduled to do that, and I'm just excited about that space. The other part of swing space that I'd like to highlight is the 5th floor of Mark Jefferson. That's been built out right now to temporarily house lab spaces from Strong Hall. Once that's done, we're back into Strong Hall. That's going to become the new home for the neuroscience and fermentation space on campus. Now, that's the background. These guys really know what's going on with the project. So Bob is going to come up here and talk about the design aspects of the project. And after that, Chris is going to get us up to date on the construction. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Obviously, with this project, since we've been working on this since 2009 and since the building's been built in 1957, we had a number of design goals we were looking to accomplish. And first and foremost of those, increase the assignable space, the usable space for the learning environment. We accomplished this really through two primary methods. We have about a 10,000 square foot addition to the space, which I'll highlight in a few moments. And we also were able to relocate a lot of mechanical systems from the lower level up to a penthouse, which we'll be building on top of this project. We also want to look then and say, how can we improve space efficiencies? How we use the space and how they interact, the adjacencies, the adjoining spaces, and the reaction back and forth. So we did a lot of work with that with our team to improve those uses, making sure the class sizes match out to room sizes, make sure uses match out well. We also want to talk about the student and study and collaboration space. And as an institution of higher education, we know that a lot of the learning that occurs in our facilities occurs outside the classrooms, outside the lab spaces. So we had a strong focus on these spaces for the students. What happens beyond the walls of the classrooms? Further to this one, we know that from a learning environment, whenever you can bring natural light into a building, not only do you increase the energy efficiencies of the building, we're using less energy, but we're also providing a better learning environment. So we focused in on that, along with the interior environment itself. It's needless to say that technologies, finishes, and materials have improved slightly since 1957. We also want to focus on the thermal performance of the building. Again, we heat and cool these buildings all the time. Strong Hall, for those of you who visited it, cooling was accomplished by windows which opened and may or may not close again. We promise you the new windows will actually close, so they actually don't even open, so we're fine with that. But we'll have full air conditioning and modern heating controls throughout, as well as an improved thermal envelope of the new building. And then lastly on this focus is that technology. 1957's technology, not quite what we wanted to see. So we've updated everything with full Wi-Fi. We'll have data, power everywhere that we possibly can think of placing it. What were we looking for with the project scope? As Scott mentioned, it is a full building renovation. If you drive by now, the only thing you're going to see is the structure. And we're fortunate. We have a building with very good bones. And just those bones alone probably saved us $7 million worth of project costs, rather than just a full demo. Those are dollars well spent. We are putting in brand new mechanical systems, plumbing systems, electrical, lighting, the building envelope, as we mentioned, all new interior finishes, technology, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We're also adding 1,000 square feet, as I mentioned, to the southeast side. We're also looking at a few other things we want to focus in on. The connectivity and vertical circulation of the building. For those of you who had walked between MJ and Strong Hall, you may have been familiar with the sideways samba you had to do to get down the stairway. That works for most people. I think I get wider. But we wanted to fix that. We wanted to enhance that. We wanted to recognize that MJ and Strong are part of a science complex that works well together in its interdisciplinary nature of the teaching. So how do we focus in on that? Our teams did a great job with that. Another focus we had also that was not only just simply the building, but also talking about what the building sits on, the site and the areas around it. So we looked at a lot of different improvements with the hardscape, that'd be the sidewalks, paving areas, seating areas, and the softscape, such as landscape areas and other features. And we'll talk about a bioswale here in a little bit. So with the design, and a little tough to see, but I'll point out that an area right now, and the red doesn't work there. Yeah. This is our addition space over there. So the 10,000 square feet addition space is on the southeast corner. It's immediately opposite of the auditorium. And this is primarily 2 classrooms on the lower level, 2 classrooms on the upper level, and the largest share of the student collaboration space. We are creating a very magnificent 2-story atrium space. We're concentrating on the acoustics. We're making sure that there's power, there's data available as students are going to work in these areas, a lot of the different areas, and we're bringing materials in that match up with what the programs use are. We want to focus with the design that we're pushing into the classrooms. You'll see that the classrooms are on the perimeter of the building where they can receive natural lights. And we also focused on the building core around the elevators and the stairwell, the infamous mine shaft for all those who are very familiar with Strong. We wanted to bring some light into the core, so we focused on allowing that light from the exterior to transmit through these two rooms into this core area. Also, by doing our core area, we've stacked our plumbing, we've stacked our mechanical needs, we have our offices stacked in these areas, and we've greatly increased the efficiency of the space. Down in this lower right-hand corner, lower left-hand corner of the drawing as you see it, is our enhanced connectivity between Strong and MJ. And I think the students will greatly benefit from that. I should mention that the first level, this is the home for the geology and geography department. Second level is housing the physics and astronomy department. Much of the same concepts again, pushing the classrooms off to the perimeters, taking the classrooms that we have some features that need no light or other low light levels, so we push those to the interior. Again, we've stacked our core areas. We've done everything we can to make sure that we have as much natural light into these learning environments as possible. The second floor space, again, of the addition, as you see in the lower right-hand corner, does include this expanded two-story atrium space, and it's going to be just a fantastic area. We offer a number of varieties of student study areas, from group study areas where we'll have whiteboards beside them, display areas, connections for data, and some AV areas as well. What are some of the things we're looking for? Obviously, is sustainability items within the design. We are going for LEED certification. The building will be LEED certified. We are operating under LEED version 4, which is the newest, latest, and greatest version. We're striving for a silver designation, and what we'll say is we'll work through that, and we're going to push everything that we can do to get to that point. Some of the features that we have, we mentioned the bioswale. This is actually a nice landscaping feature you'll see outside the building, but also helps us with stormwater, that we're not putting a lot of stormwater into our systems. We're going to delay that water getting to the systems and make it part of a landscaping feature. We'll have lighting control systems throughout the building. We're doing heat recovery systems within the mechanical systems. And we're using recycled and renewable content for a lot of our materials. What we're looking at as a big picture overall is we're expecting a 35% savings in overall operating costs for our Strong Hall, and that includes adding 10,000 square feet of space. So our design, upper left picture, Strong as we once knew it, not as we see it now. Lower right hand side, Strong as it will be. We're focusing in on really, again, this science complex idea. So we're bringing in a lot of the brick from Mark Jefferson. We're bringing in a lot of the curtain wall features that Mark Jefferson has. Yet we're still retaining an identity that is unique for Strong, so it will still have its own identity. Interiors. The left-hand picture is our two-story atrium space. Now, this rendering does not show the student population. It looks so much better when you see these students walking through there. But you can see the space, and what we're looking with a lot of the things, natural materials. We're using, on the two-story atrium walls, we're going to use a stone product that's a natural stone product. It's going to pay tribute to what a lot of geology and geography performs. With our lighting systems, you can see a lot of the ring lighting systems we're working in there. We're going to pay tribute to physics and astronomy, what they work with. On the right-hand side, natural lighting features. So we're highlighting this light, natural light from the outside to the inside. We'll have strategically placed side lights. And from the classrooms, you see we have some study niches on the right-hand side. Some of these classrooms will actually have open glass in these areas to allow that natural light to transmit into the building core. The large auditorium, the 300-seat auditorium as it was on the left-hand side. Not the most appealing place unless you really like crimson red from 1957. We're changing this. We have a recognition that's not just the materials, but the function of the space that changes as well. So in the lower picture, you'll see the new auditorium space, where we've actually changed over about half the auditorium to tables and chairs. This actually allows for greater student collaboration. The students can actually turn and work with the people behind them, or work with the people on their table as well, as part of the series. Then as well, we still offer tablet armchairs behind. So if we have a class of 100, they can work within the tables and chairs. If we have a larger lecture that needs 250, 270 people, we can fill up the whole space. It still works. The upper picture is a picture of one of the medium-sized lecture halls. Again, tables and chairs for collaboration, enhanced audio-visual, it's part of the teaching classrooms, and enhanced materials. We're bringing a lot of wood, a lot of natural materials into the project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen, who's going to talk about construction.
Well, thanks, Bob. As everyone has seen, if they've walked by the site, we're knee-deep in demolition. Actually, we're just finishing up the demo and abatement on the project. And we're actually going to be tarping the outside of the building very soon here to allow us to work in the building over the winter. We're starting enhanced foundations. So where the old brick was and we're putting new curtain wall on the outside, we need to widen those foundations and then wrap around. And when we get to the addition section, we'll put in the addition foundations there. Then next, in mid-January, you're going to start to see structural steel going up. First, it'll be on the penthouse, so we can start getting those mechanical systems up and operational as quick as possible. And then it will start filling in the addition section. All of this will be fully enclosed by summer of 2018 for us to hit our substantial completion date of December 2018 for classes in January. Here you can see just a couple of progress photos where we've stripped off all the outside veneer and then all the interior demising walls have been demolished, and we're going to start out with a clean slate to really optimize that floor plan as much as possible. Here's a couple of quick fun facts about the construction. We're going to have 100,000 bricks made to match Mark Jefferson and tie the two buildings together. We're adding 12,000 square feet of glass and glazing to bring as much natural light into the building as possible. And to support all that with the electrical and data systems, we're going to be installing 16 miles of electrical conduit and 49 miles of wire. So during the project, we're anticipating approximately 200 tradesmen helping us out with the project. An average of about 50 people on site once we really get going in the construction, with peak staffing touching about 95 people on site at a time when we're really cranking out. So as part of that sustainability that Bob touched on, it also ties into the construction. During the renovation, we're demoing the walls and all of those pieces. We've recycled over 500 tons of material to date. On site, we sort that out, the aluminum, the steel, the brick, the concrete, so they can all get to the right spots to get recycled. Also, we're using a lot of locally sourced materials for the building when it gets put back together. Our construction management contractor is teaming with the construction management department of the university to provide opportunities beyond the classroom. They're offering internships for students. They're offering learning outside the classroom, so tours for classes or the student programs that would like to see the project, and then real life experiences through job shadowing of key personnel like our superintendents or our project managers. With that, I'd like to turn it over to you guys for any questions that you might have about the project. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and now I'd like to bring up Mike Valdez for the next part of the presentations.
Thanks, Scott. That's exciting to sort of see the progress around that project as it falls away, essentially, the building, and then reappears over the course of the next year. So my goals today are to give you an update as how we're tracking on our fiscal year 18 budget. If you recall, when we were together in May, we talked about the framework for that, some of our goals. We're going to refresh those, check our progress, and then see what the future holds. So this sort of reiterates kind of what we have outlined as our budget goals back then. These are all still goals that we have in terms of realizing our financial results for the year. So a couple of highlights around that. We want to achieve a balanced budget. We want to continue to invest in student success and sort of growing our high demand academic programs. Part of that is being realized with what we're doing at Strong Hall. So when we look at kind of the framework or our assumption set that we built that budget around, back in May we were looking at 482,000 credit hours as our sort of our baseline assumption. As we've sort of worked through the remainder of the fiscal year, We saw that as being a little bit aggressive, so we brought that down to an actual budget forecast, our budget model of 478,000 credit hours. And you can see our current forecast for that is something closer to 473,000 for the fiscal year. It sort of continues the trend that we've seen in overall erosion increased as planned there. That is a 3.9%. 3.91 looks like an odd number, but the state actually offered sort of two criteria for us to stay within their tuition restraint guidelines, and that was the one that was most favorable to the university. And then you can see kind of on the other side, graduate tuition, state appropriations, and other revenues kind of, we're tracking much like we presented back in May. This slide sort of looks at sort of the allocation of our expenses, so to give you a sense of kind of where we spend our money, and it sort of highlights some of our challenges as we go forward. So the blue bar there, or I guess on this screen it looks almost violet, right? So that's salaries and benefits costs. Green is our financial aid, and this is comparing our 2017 budget with our 2018 budget. The orangish red here is SS&M, variable costs associated with that. SS&M fixed, so think of that as our utilities and other things that we don't have as much immediate control over, the flexibility. Debt, asset preservation, I misspoke, the utilities are over here. And these are things that we really don't have a lot of influence. So we're not going to change our debt service within the existing year. Our asset preservation investment is sort of a fixed number that we use annually. And then finally over here in the far right is other. The message I think to sort of take away from that is obviously, as you well know, the vast majority of our operating expenses are housed in personnel costs. This is sort of an update of a slide that I think you're probably quite familiar with at this point in time. It looks at our trend around student credit hours. You can see here we budget the 478 that we talked about earlier. We're tracking towards 473,000. Budget to budget, that 5-year decline is a little over 10%. So that's been a relatively persistent decline, so right around 2% annually. And it's also been observed in most of our peers. So when you look across the strait at most of the similar institutions, whether that's Central, whether that's Western, Wayne State, Oakland, et cetera, they have seen similar erosions in overall credit hour production. A big part of that being reflected by the demographics of the state of Michigan. So the state as a whole is graduating fewer and fewer high school seniors, and that trend is going to continue for the next several years. So when we look at some of the first measures around overall financial health, the first one I always turn to is this net tuition. So net tuition is really the gross tuition, so that's think of that as the sticker price, less the institutional financial aid. So this is, we subtract the institutional aid that the university puts forward, not things like Pell and other programs outside of the university resources. So you can see sort of the big increase that we had in FY16, which is really driven by the significant tuition increase that we had that year. So we were up 7.8%, if you recall, for fiscal year 16. That drove that net tuition up, and you saw some further erosion then in the most recent year. So the way to think about that is our gross tuition is growing slower than our financial aid, which results in sort of a lessening of our overall net tuition, or what's really available for us to fund operations. This is also a chart that you're probably familiar with. This looks at the history around state appropriations. I think at one point in time we probably thought that the university is being state supported. I think we're now state subsidized a bit. We probably, you might recall a chart we had here earlier where we looked at sort of the change over time in terms of the university's overall revenue from the state support versus tuition and fees. And that has really flipped over the last 30 years in that it used to be that around 75% of our overall revenue came from the state, 25% from student tuition and fees, and that has completely switched where now it's 75% student tuition and fees. The other sort of thing I would call out for you is sort of this comment down at the bottom here. So since 2009, we're $61 million short if we had just maintained flat state appropriations. So this is not taking into account inflation or sort of other aspects, just in nominal dollars. same dollars over that time period would yield an additional $61 million in revenue from the university. So that's a challenge for us as we go forward, because we're never going to sort of make those dollars up. And the state budget is not in a position where we would expect extraordinary increases in state appropriations going forward. So this particular slide here looks at our recent results around operating expenses. And I think the message that I'd like to sort of have you take out of this is that we've done a pretty good job at managing operating expenses over this time period. So you're looking at 2012 to 2016 as a annual compound annual growth rate of a little over 1.3%. So less than 2%, if you use that as your inflation measure, has been the growth in our overall operating expenses. So I think that's a testament to the folks who've been working around that. We've been pretty aggressive at managing things like our commodities and SS&M, and that really shows up in this expense profile. This then sort of looks at our operating results over here, and so the accounting for this in terms of GASB, which is our accounting measure, expresses this as a deficit or a surplus versus profit and loss. But you can see over the past 3 years, we've been making steady improvement around reducing our overall deficit. But over this time period, we have $65 million of annual deficits accumulated. If you recall from that state appropriation slide, it's a very similar number. I think the message or the takeaway around that is we've not fully adjusted to our new level of state support. And that's a challenge for us going forward. I will point out that this sort of level of deficit is really not sustainable, because what we're doing is sort of using our reserves or our long-term capital to finance our operations. And that's a concern for all sorts of third parties. It was highlighted by HLC when they were here, and our third-party rating agencies have similar concerns around our overall financial viability if that were to continue. So that's why we're really making this emphasis around balancing our budget and our financial results. So this slide then, I just want to sort of orient you to, these are a new set of slides that you may not have seen in the past. The far left, which is the violet on this screen, is our fiscal year 17 year-to-date actual. So where we were at as of October 2017 year-to-date. Fiscal year 18, which is our current year, the same measure, and then fiscal year 18 year-to-date budget. So I think the takeaway here is that we're actually down in real dollars. So when you think about the impacts of that, there's a tuition increase that we have, and then there's a decrease in total credit hours. So those two are kind of work counter-purpose to one another, and the net result here is about a $2 million decrease in overall net revenue. Kind of looking at some of the other measures around revenue. Can you hear me okay? Because I'd rather be able to turn the mic over.
That's right.
You heard that, right? So other sort of key components of our revenue picture, as you might imagine, we're tracking right on state appropriations. Auxiliaries are very, very close to their overall budget from a revenue perspective. Investment income, we don't budget investment income. We have had some fairly good performance in the markets the current fiscal year, but that's not a big contributor to our overall financial picture. And then the other piece down there on the far right you see is other fees. So that includes a number of things. The big driver around that above budget performance is revenue from our academic partnerships, sort of shared online activities. Now looking at expenses, so obviously the biggest bar there is personnel costs and fringe benefits associated with that. You can see we're tracking a little bit above budget there and above last year, so 3.4% above budget on the overall personnel costs. Financial aid is actually tracking below budget this year, and that's about 3% below our budget for the current year-to-date. Again, looking at October year-to-date as our basis. SS&M has been well controlled as well, operating below budget, slightly above budget on overall expenses and auxiliaries. So now then what we do is then we take that current experience and project forward where we expect to end the year using a whole set of variables, our historical trends around activity, what we typically see in terms of our realization of expenses across the fiscal year. So look to forecast that out for the future. So as we're looking at our forecast for the year, we're actually expecting to make up some ground around tuition. Where we had a very weak retention rate last year from fall to winter term. We're expecting that to really reflect sort of our historical norms more this year. So that will be a positive as it relates to our overall performance. And that's part of what's baked into that improvement. You can see these other aspects are very, very close to being on budget. Their state appropriations are very predictable, obviously, and with the exception being on the other fees that we talked about earlier. Next, then we look at expenses for the overall year. So we're tracking to be about a little over 2% on personnel costs for the year. So that's a challenge for us as we look forward. One of the things that you might have noticed that's going on, certainly if you're a hiring manager, you've noticed, is that we've been very disciplined about and deliberate about filling open positions. So that's been one means that we've used to sort of manage the overall expenses here, so that we are in a position where we have less of a variance to cover. Currently, we're around 70 total positions open across the university, and that number's been relatively steady across the overall year. So the president's office sometimes gets a little heat for holding those positions. We appreciate that because it makes us not having to be in a position where you affect positions where there's actually an incumbent in place. You can see how we're projecting financial aid to sort of continue its current trend, as well as SS&M and then auxiliary. So when we were together last time, I think we talked about the voluntary early retirement incentive plan. We were in the very early stages of that. We had not rolled that plan out. I don't know that we've even finalized it at that point. So our emphasis around that was to sort of minimize the involuntary actions that we might have to take. So overall, we yielded 34 retirees out of that plan. I believe almost all of those have actually been effectuated at this point in time. Very few of those were in positions where we felt like we needed to replace the incumbent, so there's some savings associated with that. We will, in order to maintain balance, as you saw earlier, need to make additional expense adjustments as we go through the fiscal year. And we are, as we look forward, we're expecting challenges very similar to what we see this year in terms of eroding total net revenue for fiscal year 19. So next steps, we continue to look for opportunities to grow revenue from outside our existing sort of core base, whether that's online in terms of deployment over a broader geographical area, or whether that's international recruitment, which is a strategy we're quite bullish around. And then we'll continue to sort of look to adjust our operating expenses to fit with our current level of activity, as we've seen sort of that persistent erosion around total credit hours. I think that is it, so I'll take any questions if anyone has them.
Wow.
Will we expect involuntary staffing changes?
So the question was, do we expect involuntary staffing changes? So our preference is always to sort of to manage those through other means. So when positions come open, we look at how we consolidate operations, how we can share work in a different way. Those may not yield enough, so if that's the case, then we will have to pursue sort of involuntary changes, yes.
Can you or someone talk about the process, kind of who's involved with prioritizing, like the 70 positions that you're saying right now are open? What are those conversations like? Who's part of it?
So the question is really kind of how we look at those open positions, I think, in terms of relative to the relative urgency around filling them. Like that's kind of the gist of what you're saying. So I think that that's a multi-part dialogue that includes our partners in human resources, the president's office, and the unit in who's being affected. So I know within my own division there are positions that we've elected, that we've aggressively lobbied to fill, and others that we know are not necessarily as urgent, that we sort of wait on. So I think in every case there's sort of an ongoing dialogue around that, and a big part of it has to do with the business units' relative urgency around the position. Mr. Larkin.
How have we dealt with that, the shortfall over the past X amount of years? Is that by going into reserves primarily?
That's exactly right. So the question was how we managed to fund those ongoing deficits that we talked about earlier, and you do that out of your reserves. So your resources that are available for either A, funding operating shortfalls, or B, investing in sort of key programs for you. So another way to think about that same time period, if we had not sort of realized those operating deficits, we'd have another $60 million to invest in sort of key academic programs.
Like I asked, I think, the question before, but we continue to hear that credit hour production is down, but that the personnel costs continue to be a problem. And I guess I continue to wonder about the balance between auxiliaries and academics on how those cuts are being made, and if the trend, if the academic side of the house continues to look at, are they trending level while credit hour production is down? And sometimes there may be justification for that, but, is that something that is looked at and reviewed?
So the question, I think, was really, if I may, and correct me if I get this wrong, but a question around how the university looks at prioritizing changes in its expense structure in the face of this change in activity level. And that's a complicated question, right? I will tell you that we do, as an organization, because it is our core mission, and I would fully support this, we prioritize the academic mission around that. That's not to say that we haven't made significant reductions within the academic mission over the past several years. I'll also tell you that that experience is very local. So if you're somebody who works and lives in the College of Education, your recent experience over the last 5 years is a lot different than somebody, and your expectation of what is going on in the world is a lot different than somebody who has spent the last 5 years in the College of Health and Human Services. So you can't really look at it sort of just in the aggregate. You have to really sort of drill down to where the work is actually happening.
I had one other question about...
I'm sorry, we limit everyone to one question.
I just have one other question concerning the parking RFP. And I know that when the Chartwell's RFP went through, it was written into the contract that they would continue to hire students, and it was in there at what level they would hire students. Was that same consideration given in the parking for student employment?
So the question, I think, is how has the parking RFP addressed student labor? So there's a couple of pieces around that. Number one, as we have gone through sort of the delayering of the onion, if you will, around parking operations, we in our own internal operations have had a much more complex operation that we called parking than what most of our vendors have. There are a number of those services that we're going to retain, and we think those are good candidates for student labor, things like landscaping around the lots and whatnot. But there is no specific requirement around student labor in the parking RFP. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think I heard you say earlier that, looking at our numbers from fall to winter retention, that the last couple of years they've been lower, and that this year we're hoping, or last year it was lower, but this year we're projecting that it will be closer to historically level amounts. Can you talk to me a little bit about why we're projecting a better retention rate this year than in more recent years?
Right. So the question is kind of how we look at retention fall to winter. And So that is a little bit different retention number than what the provost's office would normally talk about retention, which would normally be freshmen coming back in their sophomore fall. What we're doing actually is looking at that and using what's essentially our 5-year average. So we look at our trend line around that from fall to winter. That actually has been improving about 0.2% each of the last 4 years. And then last year, we suspect because of some of the activities that were going on around in the fall that made the environment a little less welcoming, we think that had an impact, and we believe that last fall to winter is the outlier. So we believe that we're going to sort of return to our norm. So it's not really actually expecting an increase around that. It's expecting us to sort of return to where we have been recently.
Going back to what Ann had said regarding the academic programs, are they reviewing, for lack of a better term, unproductive programs that have very few students that are in the programs to justify having faculty in those areas?
Pardon? You want to take that one? You don't want the CFO to opine on academic programs?
There's a reason we don't give CFOs tenure, so I'll take a stab at that. That was meant to be humorous and not painful. The provost and I discussed those issues. For example, back to Ann's question of, do you look at overall faculty hiring? We look at that every cycle. We look at how many faculty are leaving. We look at how many faculty, for example, may not make tenure, faculty who leave for reasons other than retirement, and then what is the fill-in strategy for those positions. We also look at productivity. Some of you have seen us eliminate programs in the last few years. We've also added programs that we think have high viability in the marketplace and also high attractiveness to students. So the answer to both of those questions are yes, and we continue to monitor those. For those of you who come to our admin directors meeting, which is, when's our next one, Mr. Graydon? December 6th, I believe we're going to have a full analysis of how we analyze staff and faculty. And I know not everyone will be there, but I do hope that the admin directors who are there do what I beg them to do every time we meet, which is to share that broadly with the people in your disciplinary areas or your programmatic areas, because there's a lot of time and a lot of effort that goes into that. I also need to say here, and it wasn't the question, but I think it's important, we are blessed in that our part-time faculty that we are able to employ because of where we are geographically is extremely different than some of our colleagues around the country. We have trailing spouses who the husband is here doing a part-time faculty gig while the wife's doing a postdoc at U of M. We have folks that have been transferred to Detroit and have a strong academic background. Those folks join us in the part-time faculty ranks and actually probably fill in, and that's not a good phrase, they fill those spots in ways that are phenomenal. I spent 7 years in rural South Dakota, and I can assure you, when we lost faculty, there was never a discussion of, do we have 2 or 3 part-timers that might be able to fill that spot, or 1 or 2 because there weren't those people. That the richness of this area with opportunities to have part-time faculty join us is really quite tremendous. We'll continue to do finance questions. We can do questions across the board. Carolyn?
This is probably more of a finance question. So after the first budget meeting, my after that meeting comment was, how might it be possible for the university community to receive more timely notice about the financial struggles that we may be in? Specifically, what I said was, had people been given advance notice about the retirement buyout and or the option to do, the furlough, people may have been in a better position to be able to line up other opportunities that would have allowed them to take advantage of the furlough options to work
4 days instead of 5, had they been given more than 2 months' notice. And so will that be addressed in the future? So this budget just talks about the right now. But we have experienced sort of this every 3 years or so where there's this layoff issue or there's cuts. And it's more than unnerving to people and their livelihoods if we know and could give that information out in a more timely.
Well, let me do the second one of those. We can do, you can do a furlough position, you can work 66%, you can work 78%, you can do that at any point. That's really a determination by the employee and the supervisor, and that is not time specific. No question on the early retirement, we would like to have had a larger lead time. Some of you suggested to me that if we could have covered health care for a year, we would have gotten a very robust turnout. I'd urge all of you, this is why they don't let tenured professors do CFO work, I'd urge all of you to sit down with David Turner or Mike Valdez. The cost on that was dizzying. We just couldn't do it. We would have loved to be able to do that. We did take too short of time there. I certainly wouldn't disagree. But as far as positions, I know in the provost's office we have some new positions that are coming in at 92% hires. Do I have that percentage right, Rhonda? We have some people that are coming in newly hired at 92%, 92% work effort. We are clearly open to that discussion, and maybe we should shout it from the treetops more, Caroline. I'm not disagreeing with you, that there are options for people to work less than a full 100% load. And obviously, the more people that do that, the more openings that we can close, those dollar amounts that we can close in the gap.
There has been, behind the scenes rumors that I think what Carolyn is getting at too is the fact that people would put something in place if they knew that was going to be required. And there have been rumors behind the scenes about all positions, the .92 thing, there's nothing here in the summer, there's no work for, all that kind of thing. And I think, again, if it's something that's going to be forced on people, if they have an opportunity ahead of time. So is that a discussion that's real, or is that...
I hope I made that clear just a moment ago. That discussion can go on any day of any week. We're certainly open to that. When we hire new positions that we think we can do at 100% or less, we will list them at 100% or less. If a person comes forward and says, look, I think I can do the job that I do on a 4-day cycle instead of 5. I'd like to work, and I'm using Caroline's term, I'd like to work a furlough. I would like to work 4/5 of what my normal work day is. If the supervisor, the manager, the person that you report to agrees, we can certainly make that happen. There's no reason not to make that happen. That's not something that everyone can do, and I fully realize that. I don't want people to leave and say, well, you think I can do my job at 66%? I don't think that. But I think there are some of those opportunities out there. As to the rumor issue, I wish I could quell every rumor that I hear. That would be my full-time job, is just running around campus trying to quell rumors. The reason we do these is try to give you the newest, the clearest, the most precise information that we have. And this is the only pragmatic way I know to do this. And we could probably go department to department, but that would be a huge use of time and probably not really good for all of you to be scheduling all those sessions. So we try to do large scale ones, we try to take your questions, and we try to respond.